Hello and welcome to everyone who is joining us from across Australia and around the world for this Truth Talk this evening on conflict and resolution with ISIRA. Today, ISIRA will be live streaming from her new Living Awareness Centre in Sydney's North, which is due to open sometime next year. And in a moment, ISIRA will be joining us. And what's going to happen today is she's going to take us through a short meditation. And then from there, she's going to lead us through tonight's topic, which is on conflict and resolution. After that, she will open it up for questions and answers, so where you'll be able to ask questions about the topic. So then I'm going to come in and I'm going to talk a little bit about ISIRA'S events and programs. And then finally, ISIRA will take us through another meditation to close this evening. So before we get started, I just want to talk to you a little bit about how the questions and answers will work this evening. So you're going to have this opportunity to ask questions, and there's two ways to do that. Okay, the first way and the easiest way is for you to simply click and click the raise hand icon. So you should see that on your screen somewhere. And that means that you're putting up your hand to interact live with ISIRA, but you need to have a camera and a microphone to do that. The other way is that you write your question in the chat box. So you might notice that there's been some chats in there already, and that's what you do. You just type your question in there and we read that out on your behalf. So what I would love to encourage you to do is to start to type your questions even now if you've got any questions about this topic on conflict resolution, because our experience is that people often leave it to the last minute, and sometimes they get to miss what ISIRA has in answer to their question. So if you've got a question, you can put it in the chat box at any time. Okay, I wish you a wonderful experience and during this Truth Talk on conflict and resolution. And ISIRA, I'm now going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Amelie, and welcome everyone. Namaste. Let's take some moments first to be fully here, bring ourselves into present moment awareness. So just closing your eyes, take 3 deep full breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you breathe in, feel yourself open and aware. And as you breathe out, emptying into this moment, allowing yourself to surrender to all that is here. Breathing in, open, awakeful awareness. And breathing out, resting deeper into this moment. As you breathe in, receiving life as it is here now. As you breathe out, resting fully into this moment, allowing yourself to arrive here, consciously here. Just allow yourself to relax with the flow of in and out breath. Simply feel and observe the rise and fall of breathing. Life is breathing in you and through you. Naturally, all of life is this. Rising and falling, coming and going. All of this suspended in the continuum of the here and now. Notice that even as you bring your attention to this, the here and now, that there is a point of stillness, a silence. There's a sense of the gap, the pause between the activity of the mind and the activity of perceived events that come and go. Here, in this gap, is the constant self. This which is constant, underlying each and every moment, proceeding within, transcending, becoming each and every moment. This beingness remains untouched, unchanged by all that is coming and going. Just allow yourself to be present and aware with this. Notice there is a deeper sense of your beingness in this. This beingness has a calm, a silence. It is all centered, all in, and yet all open and boundless. Everything is arising from within it, falling into it, contained within it. All is, in fact, this. Notice as you allow yourself to rest here attentively with this presence of beingness, that within you is a calming. There is a settling. Naturally, of its own accord, all the phenomenon of life comes and goes effortlessly. As you rest in presence with this, something within you becomes calmer. There is a sense of realigning, perhaps just a sense of energy or openness and curiosity. But notice you are more receptive. There is a sense of your own inner centeredness here. And within this is a felt degree of peace and calm, a recognition of your true nature, the true nature underlying all things. Here, there is the glimmer of remembering yourself as you truly are. Take a moment just to acknowledge this. Allow yourself to embrace this. Welcome this. As you welcome this here now, you embrace this moment as it is, allowing yourself to simply be here, attentively open and aware. Take a deep breath into your innermost being. Acknowledge this aware presence, the unchanged one that is within you, underlying all things. As you acknowledge this, take another deep breath into your innermost being and gently affirm to yourself, I am here. As you feel this truth now, that indeed you are here, take a deep breath into your body. Feel yourself seated here now. Notice the energy within you and all around you. Notice that here everything is the presence, the flowing field of energy and beingness. All that is experienced is here, simply here. As you feel yourself centered, open and receptive now, take a moment to give thanks, allowing yourself simply to receive this which life is here now, and whatever life is offering you here now. Take a moment to give thanks, to be centered, present, open and connected here in this moment. And now breathing deeply with this thanksgiving into your heart center. Acknowledge the love, the grace that is here within you. And breathing with this gratitude, feel it flowing through your form, from cell to cell and radiating through your aura, vibrating in harmony with all existence. Breathing now as this all open centered presence into your body, feeling yourself centered here, your form seated, relaxed, your awareness open and receptive. And taking a deep breath again into your body, gently stretch and slowly open your eyes. So, welcome. It's wonderful to be here with you, really here, and that we can acknowledge, no matter where we are, in ourself, in place, in the world, that we are all here, always here. And in being here, we can recognize the same presence that creates each and every one of us, the same life in which we are existing. And even as we acknowledge this in a small and simple fashion, something changes within us. We begin to open again. We feel a settling, a calming in ourself. We feel the underlying calm of life. And instead of feeling so isolated and separate, we begin to recognize that we are actually always in life. We are all here together. The irony is that we spend so many of our moments trying to understand ourself and existence by looking outside, by questioning each other, analysing each other, or forever obsessing over ourselves as some separate individual. And yet, ever so simply, by bringing our attention back in, we begin to see ourselves and each other more clearly. We're able to have a more felt experience of the truth that actually we're not so separate. That we are not alone. That we are the one shared life. So, how is it then, as this one shared life, and by shared I mean connected, how is it then that we have ended up in such a magnificent mess? So much conflict. It might seem odd to call it a magnificent mess, but it's quite extraordinary, really, isn't it, if we consider what we feel, what we perceive, or what we believe to be ourself. How we see ourselves, how we see each other, how we see the world, and how we see what is happening in the world. And for sure, we can all agree that here now today, we are experiencing a profound degree of conflict, individually and collectively. And it's the extent of this conflict that is felt that is actually driving this groundswell of deeper inquiry. So the fact is, the more we suffer, the greater degree of suffering we feel, the deeper a degree of inquiry we come to. And this is a bit of a foolproof mechanism in existence. It kind of points to the truth of our nature over and over and over again. The reality that if we try to exist in opposition to our true nature, if we lose sight of our true nature, we generate an experience of such conflict that it is no longer bearable. It forces us into a transformation. It forces us into inquiry. It forces us to realign. You see, existence is as existence is. You are what you are. Nature is what it is. It has its own fundamental makeup, its own natural principles. And when we live contrary to those fundamental principles, when we fight the true nature of ourself, each other and existence, it becomes so discordant. We become so conflicted. The suffering becomes so great that we have no choice but to rearrange ourselves. So conflict is actually the tipping point of a rearrangement. It represents the moment that things can no longer continue to function under the same model. How then, as a human experience, did we get ourselves to a point of such extreme conflict? Are we, any one of us, different in this conflict? If we look closely, we understand that all conflict is the same. All conflict arises from the same fundamental core. It arises from the same one cause. Conflict does, however, have different symptoms. It's why we get lost in the stories, all the stories of the symptoms of conflict, because it's so unsettling and so disturbing. We're trying to make sense of it, but we lose sight of the root cause of it. We try to rearrange everything at an external level when actually the root cause is internal. So humanity is suffering the very same set of symptoms and conflict. We go from the root cause of that through 6 layers of conflict. Let's first consider really what conflict is. We know that it's a very disturbed state. We know that that disturbed state has reached such a critical mass within ourself and surrounding ourself that it's no longer tenable. Where does that come from? It comes from a process of change and tension. But it's not just that there's a process of change and tension, it's that actually we're resisting that process of change and tension. And why are we resisting this process of change and tension? Why is because we are rejecting ourselves as this. And why do we reject ourselves as this? Because we've forgotten ourselves. We're disconnected from our true nature, our true self. The tricky thing here is that there's actually two aspects to self. There is self, the all-being, the universal self, the eternal self, consciousness, or the logos, that which is transcendent of time and place, yet in which all time and place are occurring, are created and experienced. And then there's the self which is made manifest as an expression of this timelessness, the individual self, the unique vehicle of self, our little self. And so when we lose connection with our own inner being, our essential self, that one that is timeless, bigger than the little self, unfortunately, we get lost in the little self and we become blindsided. We do not see existence as it truly is anymore. And that is because we disconnect from nature and life as a whole. So as long as we disconnect from our own innate being, our inner essence, and we project our sense of self externally, at the same time, we disconnect from nature and each other. So if we trace back conflict, we can go all the way back to the roots of our human experience where we did experience greater connectedness and greater harmony within ourselves and with each other and life as a whole. And we can see that that relationship with our inner being and nature and the collective sustained a state of balance. Did it mean that we never experienced conflict? No. Did it mean that we were free of tension and growth and upheaval? No. But it did mean that we were able to move with that, grow with that in a way that continued to carry us through different cycles and stages, from baby to child to adolescent to adult to wise old person, and different stages and cycles of human culture, the cycles of nature, etc. Once we started to fixate on the individual self and we were dispossessed, disconnected from nature and our spirit, we began to tread down this path, which, well, I don't know about tread. I think it's a very slippery slope. We've been sliding down it. And this slippery slope is one of a never-ending chase. There's always lack because of this disconnect. So the root cause of all conflict is this disconnect from our true self, and therefore the false relationship with our sense of self. It's not that the little self in its own right is wrong or false. It's a fundamental aspect of creation. It's that we have a false relationship with it, that we forget that it is transient. It cannot be something fixed. So in disconnecting from that which is the continuum, the ever constant, we begin to try to make this little self something fixed. Because actually when we disconnect from the ever-present self, the universe, the cosmos, spirit, we disconnect from the very fuel of life. the energy, the sustenance of life, that which truly nurtures us, that which is truly love. Why? Because it embraces, encompasses all things unconditionally. It does not reject or divide anything. It is all inclusive. The little self, on the other hand, being distinct, sees itself as separate. So when the human began to give greater relevance to the little self, the individual, and feed this, the human began to give false authority to identifications. And in giving false authority to all these identifications, we started to build up all these conditions of fixed ideas, fixed stories, fixed patterns. We lost sight of how dynamic we are, that we are the whole balance of all forces, light and dark, creative and destructive. And in having lost connection with that which truly nurtures us, we feel a profound lack in ourself. There's such a deep loss in ourself, a loss of life force, a loss of connection within ourself and the cosmos, that we begin to seek ways of filling up that loss. And how do we do that? If we're already identified with a separate self, we seek out more separate pieces. We try to collect more pieces. And of course, that's an external quest. So we go from this root cause of disconnect into the first symptom, the disconnection with ourself and the cosmos, believing we are separate, which leads to false relating, false relationship with ourself and false relationship with each other. That leads to the next scale of conflicted symptom, which is dis-ease, a discomfort with ourself and with each other, because we are actually having a conflicted relationship with self, a false relationship with ourselves, because we're no longer seeing ourselves as we truly are. We no longer see life as it truly is. So we go from disconnect to false relating, conflicted relationship with self and other, actually seeing a fixed separate other, into dis-ease, emotional conflict and discomfort. And the more emotional conflict and discomfort we have, the more we try to compensate for that. And so that's where we've entered that slippery slope of trying to fill up a hole that can never be filled by material things. So we fall into the trap of materialism. From there, we begin to have the wrong relationship with the material realm, as in nature, and we become quite corrupt. We violate that relationship with form. We violate nature itself. And so we have conflict with the environment. And because we have conflict with the environment and our greater place of belonging, which is not just our own separate individual home, but actually our community, our whole environment, we end up in conflict as community. We end up in conflict as a global whole. That's where we are today. So the conflict we're seeing at a global scale begins at an individual level. It's not a political issue. It's actually an ideological issue. In fact, it's not even really truly an ideological issue. It's a cultural issue. In fact, it's not even just a cultural issue. It is an identification issue. And it's not just an identification issue. It is a perceptual issue. And it's not just a perceptual issue. It's a state issue. It has everything to do with our state. So if we want to find true resolution with ourself, let alone with each other and the world, we have to regain a true state of being. If we cannot regain a true state of beingness, realign ourselves with what is true, our true self, the nature of everything, the way it truly is, if we can't realign with that, we're not going to resolve our conflicts. We're not going to find resolution. In fact, we go about it by way of trying to create a false measure. Even, for example, spiritually, we think, well, everything's in so much conflict. I will take on all these ideologies of being a more peaceful person, a more compassionate person, and I will think positive thoughts and I will be all loving, when you're still in denial of your whole nature. You are still in denial of the fact that you are creative and destructive. You're still in denial of the fact that what you keep identifying with is impermanent and cannot be made fixed. You're still trying to make things fixed patterns. You're still trying to operate from fixed patterns, let alone the fact that these fixed patterns are based on divisive stories. Stories based in the idea and the perception and the state of separation. The state of separation is this. It's the mind. The mind is the creator of conflict. We cannot wish for resolution and to begin to create a greater sense of harmony and wellness with ourselves and each other as long as we live in this state in the mind. The abode of peace and harmony is the heart. As humans, we need to learn to live from this again. That's a state. The state of love, the state of presence, the state of being in what we are, the state of being open to and with what we are, what truly is. And that means accepting, first and foremost, the things we hate and fear. That's what love does. Love says, come as you are. Come totally as you are. There is no need for you to pretend, to fake, to try to be anything other than what you are. Nature does not try to pretend or fake to be anything other than what it is. It is creative and it is destructive. So until we accept the impermanence of ourself and the destructive nature of ourself, we cannot take responsibility. We cannot move forward with a true understanding because we are fighting against it. We're fighting against ourselves and against our true nature. And as long as we fight against it, we're blind to it. As long as we're blind to it, we don't understand it. As long as we don't understand it, we can't bring consciousness through it. You know what resolution is? Resolution is a state of conscious integration. That's what resolution is. Resolution is, I'm just going to try and hop over all of those negative things. I'm going to try and run from them and create some utopian world. That's not resolution. Resolution is open our eyes. Resolution is self-realization. Resolution is seeing what we are and allowing ourselves to undergo this process of integration. We have to integrate all that we are. We have to integrate our little self with our whole self again. So that means the way forward with our society demands the attention of both these directions. One, the little self must be transformed, but it can no longer be done singularly or in isolation from the whole. It must be an inclusive experience. We must see that we're in this together. So as we reconnect to ourself, we open our eyes again to what we truly are. We begin to understand it. We begin to understand each other. Only then do we suspend our judgments and our hatred. Only then do we allow in everything as it is, instead of projecting onto everything what we think it should be or what we believe it to be. That is behind all our human conflicts. This perpetual mode of projecting all these fixed ideas onto ourselves and onto each other. They have to break down. They have to fall apart. We have to accept the inevitability that it's not going to feel comfortable. Tension is inevitable. Conflict is optional. It's not going to feel comfortable, but it is going to be liberating. Embracing that discomfort actually brings you a different form of peace and strength than you've ever known before. As long as you try to avoid the discomfort, ignore it, you don't have true peace or true strength. Consider a shaman. Consider a wise man. Where does their peace and strength come from? Consider a Buddha. Where does their peace and strength come from? Not from denying what is, but from embracing what is. That is the ultimate remedy for resolution that we're all looking for. And it begins with each and every one of us to see ourselves as we truly are. That's it. Just begin to see it and welcome it. So here now, you are already in this journey. You are already in this inquiry. You are already in this quest to see yourself as you truly are, to see life as it truly is again. We are sharing that discovery together. So I'd like to open the way for us to share this conversation, for us to consider this journey together.
Thank you, ISIRA. So we're going to now open it up for you to ask questions of ISIRA. And as I said at the beginning, there are two ways you can do that. The first way is you just put up your hand in the chat box and you say, and that's telling us you have a microphone and you have a camera, and you'll just go live and you'll have a chat with ISIRA. You're going to see how that works in a minute. The second way is, if you prefer not to go on screen, is that you can type your question in the chat box. So you just type up your question and I read it on your behalf. So I would encourage you to type your questions and ask your questions now, because as I said, so often what happens is there's a bit slow at the beginning, and then at the end we get this rush of questions, okay? So, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with Chintamani, and you've got a question this evening. So, Chintamani, it's over to you.
Namaste. Hello. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for talking. The question I have, if there's conflict within myself, and at the moment I know I've sort of been quite honest with myself. I still feel the conflict within within sort of my inner dialogue and what I'm telling myself. But when I also look at where I'm meant to go, I know within what, as in physically, what I'm meant to be doing, and I just feel very lost and in a void. Sort of, I don't know what to do as far as that conflict between what I'm meant to, how I'm meant to exist in this world, and with the conflict of my inner conflict.
Yes, I think you're not alone with your sense of confusion in that regard. You know, it's a very common symptom or theme that's happening for many, many people. And I think it's because we've become so perpetually lost in this idea of what we're supposed to be and all these expectations of being something other than fundamentally purely what we are. We've generated this world of identities inside ourselves and outside ourselves, and we're really not living in natural accord with our true human nature. You know, as a society, we're living at a pace that is untenable. We're chasing more and more possessions, more and more attainments. And actually, the human journey is not about acquiring and attaining things. It's about evolving, and it's about a transformation. So where you're at is perfect. Where you are at right now does not demand or ask you to be anywhere else. And it's actually only until you allow yourself to completely and utterly and honestly be with where you are that naturally something emerges that prompts you to move in a certain way. But we've been told that that's not sufficient, that we're meant to be doing something else. So really, the internal conflict is the point of command at the moment. That is where you are meant to be visiting. The fact that it's occurring, the fact that you don't have clarity of where to go and what to do is the very indicator that you are exactly where you need to be and doing exactly what you need to be doing, which is sitting in your discomfort, sitting in your confusion. Really? I know that sounds like a terrible option because we've been told we're meant to chase something nicer. You know, we're meant to somehow find more comfort and find something better, something wonderful. But that's actually part of the problem. You know, we've been avoiding and denying the dysfunction for so long that all of that has been so suppressed that everything's breaking out and busting out all over the place now. So really, that's what's going on. That we've been in denial of our darkness, we've been in denial of, you know, our destructive nature and all those destructive forces. We've been living under oppressions and suppressions as if somehow we're all meant to be perfect, wonderful, beautiful things. And we're all basically pretty fucked up. We don't know what's going on. So let's get real with that. Let yourself be real with that.
I think for now, it's, I'm sort of saying, okay, I'm being more honest, even deeper honest with myself about the discomfort I feel and about how I really, you know, how I sort of the feel of the brokenness and just sort of like, and the loss, feeling completely, utterly bewildered and lost. And just go, okay, I don't know what to do. So not so much I do nothing, I just sit with it. And it's sort of, it's been a very long time. And it's sort of, you go, okay, will there be a point where I'm going to go a little bit more centeredness or is it just going to be a constant void?
Well, look, it's an interesting question because I see how there can be that delicate line between getting completely lost in simply sitting with the conflict and being so identified with that you lose sight of something bigger. But the bottom line is that conflict is not an eternal thing. You know, the conflict is ephemeral as well. The process of dynamic change is part of an ephemeral function. So we cannot be stuck in our suffering and our stories forever, but we are stuck in it as long as we need before we see it for what it truly is. So there comes a point when, as we begin to see it for what it truly is, there's this emergence of a greater conscious presence. And it reminds us that actually there is a responsibility that we have over and above our individual self, our individual sense of suffering, and that actually the reason we recognize our suffering is to understand our power, that we are creative and destructive beings. And once we understand that, we begin to take more conscious responsibility. We begin to recognize that there is something far bigger than our individual self that we are a part of and we are here for. So really, it's just a matter of time before your own sense of honesty with your brokenness and your conflict exhausts itself. Because we are designed as a part of the whole. We're designed to function for the whole. We don't exist in isolation. And it's just really a matter of allowing yourself that honesty in each and every moment. And there's a certain degree of that honesty which is very, very difficult to explain and describe, that we don't arrive at it by this. We arrive at it as something felt. And that's where the challenge comes in, that there's a part of the mind that still wants to solve this. There's a part of the self that says, oh, but hang on, how should I be responding to this? Is this okay? What should I be doing? When something deeper within you is actually making its way through this. And that will ultimately be revealed.
Hopefully sooner rather than later. Thank you very much, Isira. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you, Chintamani. So, Isira, our next question is from Saisha in Western Australia. So I'm going to hand over to you, Saisha, for you to ask your question live.
Thanks, Emily. Namaste.
Namaste.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all your insights. The thing that's coming up for me is, and I've heard you say often, it is a process. Of course, it is a process. And so with the two aspects that are the big self, the small self, in that process, what I have noticed is there's some point where once people or get a sense of their own boundary, it's once they've gone through that then can open to everything. So I'm not sure, that's sort of what I see, like firstly, in some way. So I just wonder how that all feeds in, because the process at the moment, I would say globally, as you say, is a magnificent mess. I love that expression. And it certainly does start with the individual. I also understand that, and certainly for myself have felt those energies of both destructive and the other side. So yeah, the process of that and where boundaries fit in.
Yeah, sure. I guess the reason there are so many issues with boundaries is actually because the average individual is not truly sitting within themselves with awareness. So it's a bit kind of strange and paradoxical that on the one hand, individuals are so stuck in their individual ego identity and, you know, kind of indulging that in quite a narcissistic fashion. But on the other hand, there's such a profound dissociation from their self as an embodied conscious manifestation that we have this polarity playing out between individuals that are so self-centered that it's a constant take and a constant suck, and individuals that are so dissociated that they actually don't know their own boundaries and can be so easily violated. And actually that's the polarity of the same issue, which is if we are not truly embodied in ourself, truly present in ourself, and we don't know ourself, we can't know our whole self, and we can't have right relationship. So there's the irony, is that we actually have to be seated in the individual self consciously to be connected to the whole self and with each other. And yet the opposite seems to be happening. The individual is actually dissociated from our individual self. So even you think narcissism, we look at the symptoms of narcissism, it's such an egocentric condition, right? But why is that? It's actually because the individual is so profoundly disconnected from their true self, their nature, their own unique, authentic nature. They're so profoundly wounded that they're in a dissociated state and therefore having to make everything about that false self. So this is why I talk about the necessity of understanding these two different aspects and restoring right relationship between these two different aspects, the little self and the great self. Oftentimes in the journey of awakening, we think we're meant to somehow renounce the little self. You know, we're meant to be going beyond that, when that's actually totally erroneous. We're not meant to be renouncing it and going beyond it. We're meant to be fully consciously incarnating it. We're meant to be fully here and liberated to be the unique, authentic expression that is ourself. If we can do this and we can celebrate this and have a reverence for this unique manifestation of ourself, we can have that same reverence for each other. And if we have that reverence for ourselves and we have it for each other, we have right, respectful relation. We have right boundaries for ourselves and for each other. So it comes back to all about this conscious seatedness in ourself, not departing. You know, I think we really have to undo a lot of destructive ideas around spirituality. And in particular, this notion that we're meant to transcend in order to be liberated, and we're meant to go away from this, you know, individual self. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. For sure. This is the mechanism. So that's
sure
exactly
is.
it. That this body that I'm in is my connector.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
It is the instrument of the consciousness that is self, expressing itself, experiencing itself, manifesting itself.
Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Saisha, so much. So, Isira, the next question is from Karen, and it is, I'm going to be reading it on their behalf. And it is, I find myself absorbing the energy of an issue to avoid conflict, as I feel at some level myself and the people around me are not able to handle it right now. It's just not the right time. I sort of feel it's easier to bury it inside myself. Do you have any insights around this and what I can do about it?
Yeah, Amelie, actually, I missed a little bit of the very first part of that question. Can you just read the first part again?
Yes, I find myself absorbing the energy of an issue to avoid conflict. So I don't want the conflict. So it's just like, I'll just absorb it, I'll take it in, it says. And because I don't believe anybody's ready for the conflict. So it's easier if I absorb it rather than, bring it up with other people.
Yeah. So absorbing it actually really is internalizing it. And when it's internalized and not expressed and met consciously, it's actually suppressed. It's not dealt with. So this belief actually that another is not ready to handle the conflict is unfortunately an illusion. And you're not the only one that is afraid of this or feels this, but we've actually been cultivating this notion that we're not equipped to deal with conflict. And that goes right back into the roots of religion and the misdirection of a lot of the original teachings through religion. For example, that Christ took on our sins for us. Well, in a way, what you're saying is a bit similar to that story, that religious story, that Christ took on our sins for us, that if you can somehow absorb someone else's conflict because they're not ready for it, that's better than a person not being ready for the conflict. So what I'm saying is actually fundamentally as a human collective, we've unfortunately done ourselves a disservice. We are imagining that we're not equipped to cope with conflict and upheaval and change, when in actual fact we're designed specifically for that. The very fact we keep denying our destructive nature, we deny the fact that we have these negative forces within us, we have the potential of every negative expression within us, means that we also have the capacity to navigate our way with it. So we need to liberate ourselves and each other to recognize we do have what it takes to consciously negotiate our way through every single conflict we face. We are conscious beings. And as long as we avoid that, we actually block that passage. We need to, instead of avoiding it and continuing this suppression of the conflicts and trying to avoid them because it's so uncomfortable, we just really need to face it with our eyes wide open, our hearts wide open, and say, hey, you know what, we've got to come back to reality as it is. It's not a comfortable, safe place. I've said this over and over again, and I think it's probably one of the most important things for humanity to recognize again. We are not a safe, secure phenomenon. Everything is at risk. It is constantly being destroyed and being reformed. And likewise, everything is constantly dying. So conflict is actually as a result of us avoiding that truth. If we stop avoiding this destructive reality and we embrace and accept our own destructive capacity, that everything is dying, everything is impermanent, and we surrender to this, we allow ourselves to die from moment to moment to moment, actually our conflicts will begin to unravel. Our sense of conflict will ease. We begin to understand ourselves and what is happening in a different way. And we find that we are equipped to navigate our way through change and transformation. So actually conflict is nothing other than our resistance to this process of change and everything that is being destroyed. So what am I saying here, Karen? Well, I'm saying try the opposite. Instead of absorbing the conflict as if somehow you need to protect others from that, try meeting it with open space and say, hey, let's be here together with this conflicting energy. You know, let's be here with our eyes open and see what happens then. Really, we've got nothing to lose. It can't be much more of a mess. Well, some people might debate that, but actually, you know, the truth is, once we allow ourselves to undergo the process of upheaval, things come into a different arrangement.
Thank you, Isira. So the next question is from Denise, and it is, as humans, we sometimes have contracts with others to grow and evolve. Could you clarify if this is actually true? And how does it work in terms of karmic relations? And how do we move forward?
Sure. You know, as souls expressing and manifesting through a variety of lifetimes, there's patterns and design in what we are, and that has its own momentum and direction and creative plan in a sense. So absolutely, we do choose our life settings and the various families we come into and individuals that we're going to share our journey with. And that's just part of the design for us to undergo the experiences we need to. So certainly I have experienced and observed that to be the case. Of course, you know, this could be something we could debate from philosophical or religious perspectives or metaphysical perspectives or scientific perspectives, etc., etc. But what matters is, what do we observe as a human experience? We definitely observe that we encounter very particular types of people throughout our life. We encounter very particular patterns of themes or stories or issues or challenges. And so that in itself indicates there is some design to what we are experiencing. And however we want to explain that or describe that, I guess at the end of the day, really doesn't matter. What matters is how we are experiencing it. And the experience itself indicates there's definitely some kind of arrangement we're all involved in big and small ways. And if we understand that that is all part of the design of the universe, then we can accept that it's actually working for the greater good of the whole. And when we can accept that, we no longer take issue with what we think of as karma and, you know, karmic merit or karmic debt, because everything is working in accord with everything. It is all part of one whole system functioning in evolutionary terms, in creative terms. It's all part of the plan.
Thank you, Isira. So this question is from Janella, and it is, what is the difference between tension and conflict? And what are the characteristics of each?
So that's a great question, because you hear me saying this quite often, that tension is inevitable and conflict is optional. So tension is relating to the dynamic play of energies. So we know that all life is energy, and we come to see and experience or encounter life actually through its interactive forces and dynamics. So we have positive and negative forces, and it's in the point where those two meet and part that life continues to spring forth. And that's actually a tension point. So there's always this tension between past and future, positive and negative forces. And that tension is the vital life force, that everything is a continuum, everything keeps unfolding. So as an energy, it gives us a felt lived experience. That's what makes us say, yeah, I'm alive. In actual fact, that's how and why we say, yeah, I'm alive. Why? Is because we are actually experiencing that constant point of tension. So if we then look at what that is, it's this shift between everything taking on an expression, an adopted state, and expressing itself by way of patterns. And that's what we might call the familiar or static, something that has a degree of continuum that can be recognized, a pattern. And then we have that which is dynamic, which is constantly breaking and changing. It's not staying the same. And we see that those two forces are coalescing in life constantly. But actually, the primary force of life is dynamic. Reality is not fixed. It is not actually static. It does have patterns, but none of those patterns are constantly fixed or static. Now, what then is conflict? Conflict is when we have a psychological resistance to those dynamics. When psychologically we falsely identify with patterns as being real and we try to make them fixed. We try to apply them consistently beyond the moment that they express themselves spontaneously and dynamically. And so actually what happens is the psyche becomes a slave to those false perceptions, the idea that we can make something fixed. So conflict is the resistance to tension. Conflict is the resistance to change. Conflict is the resistance to our dynamic nature. There is something in the human psyche that has taken on this illusion, this idea, this belief that happiness is something that is static. It's a continuum. We should be able to feel good in some continuous fashion. It's the illusion that security is when we can make something permanent and known and comfortable. It's the illusion that I am something. I am what I think. I am a something that can be defined and measured and held accountable to that definition and measure. That is what generates conflict because it is counter the true nature of life. So that's what conflict is. Conflict is simply our resistance to the true nature of ourself, the true nature of existence. And that's why I continuously say that tension is inevitable, conflict is optional, because we are dynamic. And as such, we are constantly going to be feeling and experiencing varying degrees of tension. The irony is that it's when we accept this, we embrace this, we cease to fight against this or resist this, that we actually finally feel at peace. So it's not that we're free of tension in order to feel peace, it's that we welcome tension. We accept it. We move with it. We dance with it. We allow ourselves to be that which we are, which is dynamic.
Thank you, Isira, and thank you, Janella, for that question. So the next question is from Ava. So over to you, Ava.
Namaste. We can't hear Ava.
Hear Ava.
Now, yes, I think we can hear you now. Thank you.
Louder.
Yes, hello.
So sitting here and receiving all these words of wisdom, I feel this is all true. But I was wondering, when I am in the middle of a conflict or in the middle of a situation, it's a lot harder to remember all the words of wisdom. So are there some small reminders or some questions I can ask myself in the middle of a conflict to better understand and be present with the conflict?
Yes, yeah, thank you. That's very relevant. So earlier, I spoke about conflict ultimately being an issue that comes right back through the different layers we think it is, from outside to inside. And if we go back deep enough, it goes behind perception into state. So the key pointer to be able to act from a more conscious space is to recognize that the moment you are feeling conflict or afraid of the conflict, struggling to meet the conflict, when you are disturbed by that, it's an indication that you're in a certain state. Conflict is a state of resisting what is, and that implies that your state is coming from something already formed. It's trying to work from ideas and stories that have already been established. It might be your idea of the person, it might be your idea of what should happen or should not happen. Either way, it's a state which relates to something fixed. So it's a mental state. That means what is required is a shift of state. Always then, when you encounter conflict, whether it's internally or externally, it is an invitation to recognize the state you are occupying. And the first thing you can do to transform that conflicted state then is to break state, change state. So that might be take 3 deep breaths. That helps change state. It might be walk out of the room. It might be, instead of go to say what you would usually say, challenge yourself to be silent and simply listen for a while. It's all about occupying a different state. So if we occupy a state which is deeply engaged and open and receptive in the now, truly receptive in the now, we actually cannot be conflicted in ourself. We may be confronted with conflict or faced with conflict, but we are no longer actually operating in conflict towards it. Now, please remember what I was saying before. That does not mean that you should feel comfortable. And why I say that is because it is more likely you are still going to be feeling some degree of disturbance, some degree of tension, because there is something dynamic happening when there is conflict. Conflict says there's something or someone trying to resist whatever this dynamic thing is. So let yourself feel the discomfort and allow yourself to be in a different state with it.
Thank you very much. That was very clarifying.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ava. So the next question is from, I think it's Michael. Over to you, Michael. Ask your question now.
Hi. It's actually he, but you can say Michael. So,
thank you, Michael.
It's difficult for foreigners to pronounce.
Who's the foreigner? Who's foreign here?
I'm the foreigner, yes. I can say Michael, yes. I have a question. We all live in a civilization with laws and constitutions and rules and regulations that start from the idea that we are separate. So in fact, the cities we live in, the countries we live in, keep us in a separate state. How can we deal with this? Because that generates conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely correct. So all of our laws, our governance, are completely based in divisive stories. And this is a narrative that has been perpetuated over many, many centuries now. And this narrative has been fueled not just by politics and governance, but by religious bodies, by educational bodies. You know, it's rife. It's inculcated throughout the entire human experience. Now, if we understand that that is purely and utterly a narrative, that's what it is. It's words. It's a set of stories. Then we have our inroad. Our task is to share and generate a narrative which restores truth. That's what I'm doing. That's actually what my task is, if you like. My role with you all is to share with you this narrative which points back to our true nature, and that is we are absolutely interconnected. All life is interconnected. So as I share with you these truths, as you recognize these truths, as we all recognize these truths, what's happening is we collectively are beginning to share a new cultural story. And this cultural story, in actual fact, isn't totally new. It's the old new story, because we all come from this. We all originate from this. If we go back to our indigenous roots, which every one of us does go back to that, it may be way, 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 way back, but every one of us does go back to that. So when we look into those roots, we see the same narrative, a one human cultural story. And that story actually generates a shift of perception, a shift of relating. So it's no longer about laws and regulations, and that actually this issue can be solved at the level of law and governance. It has to be solved at the level of the stories we're telling to ourselves, the stories we hold, the stories we give to each other. And that's up to each and every one of us. It's time for us to rewrite that narrative. Not only to rewrite it, but to reimagine it. And what do I mean by that? I mean, we can't just say it as a set of words. We have to hear it. And in hearing it, feel it. In feeling it, see it. In seeing it, live it and express it. We have to walk our talk. But it does begin with this right narrative.
Thanks very much. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And Isira, that was our last question for this evening. And before we go on, I'd just like to, and before Isira takes you through the last meditation, I just want to share a little bit on how Isira can support you to live consciously and support in your awakening of your true self. So The first part of that is she can help you to reconnect to your true essence and transform your life and awaken to your truth. And what I'm sharing with you tonight is something very exciting, and it's the launch of a new program called Alpha Breathing that ISIRA is providing everyone at no charge. It's her foundational practice, her signature practice. And it's all about supporting you to shift and release agitation within yourself and empty out unconscious habits and energies that are stored within you from the past. So this can help lead you to a state of calm. So it's a series of videos. It also talks about the brainwave states. So you'll see that there's a link there from ISIRA'S website. So that's ISIRA.com. So you can go on there and click on online programs and you can access it straight away, or you can follow that link that you can see there on the screen. The second thing I want to talk to you about, and it's very exciting, is a live event that ISIRA will be holding on the 17th and 18th of November. And it's a 2-day intensive program. And this program's all about supporting you to go deeper within, to really access the truth of who you are. And that's why it's over 2 days. ISIRA will be using different tools and practices, and she'll also be connecting with the whole group to determine the best way to take you even deeper. You'll also have an opportunity to ask ISIRA questions that are related to what you're learning. And people find this really profound. And I don't know if you've read any of the information on the website about this program, but many of the people who come to a live program with ISIRA say they just didn't realize how deeply transformative it will be. So have a look at the website. Again, the address is on there. It's ISIRA.com and all the information is there. And there's a great early bird price that you can enjoy at the moment. The third thing I want to share with you, and this is for those of you who want to conduct an online program, is the 7 attunements. Now, the 7 attunements is actually 7 modules, 23 videos, and 8 hours of content. And it was taken from a live program that ISIRA delivered over 2 days. And the 7 attunements are the 7 qualities of enlightened being. And they've been developed by ISIRA to help you to reattune in a simple and really profound way to the truth of what you are, to that truth of consciousness. And you know, many people have used it and found it so profound in the changes they've been experiencing with it. So go online, have a look on it. When you go online, you'll see that we've listed all the different elements of the program so you can understand what you're receiving. The next thing I want to talk to you about is what ISIRA has available for you coming up as well. And so one of which is her book, Awakening You, that's available all the time. And then she's also got a program called Satsang, and that is that's I think on the 23rd of September. You can read all about that online, but it is an opportunity for you to sit in consciousness. You can also ask questions, and that will be held live at North Sydney in Sydney, Australia, or you can join ISIRA live for live streaming for that as well. And finally, her autobiography, Buddha on the Dance Floor, is a profound book. You know, I've read that about 4 or 5 times, and each time I read it from cover to cover, I learn another thing about myself. Even though it is about her, it's her autobiography, there is so much in it for yourself. And again, I can thoroughly recommend it. So we're going to be, we have these Truth Talks every couple of months, and the next Truth Talk is going to be on peace and unity, I think. I'm waiting for that slide to come up, and I'm sure it'll be there in a minute, and it's going to be on Sunday, the 21st of October. So ISIRA invites you to join her at that time as well. So the next live event is on the 23rd of September for Satsang. Then we have the Peace and Unity. And then after that is, of course, the live 2-day event, the 2-day intensive program with ISIRA. So I'm going to be handing it back over to you, ISIRA, so that you can finish with the closing meditation. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Over to you, Isira.
Thank you, Amelie. Yeah. And thank you everyone for joining and for your own journey and quest for greater awareness in yourself and in life, because it's you that is bringing change to your world and therefore the world. So perhaps we can take some moments now of sharing in this, connecting within ourselves and with each other, recognizing our interconnectedness, and that here in this oneness, we do know the truth and we are able to act from this truth. And when we know and act from truth, we do bring greater love and well-being and peace into the world. So let's take a few moments again to acknowledge that here within you, within each of us, is this state of pure being. This pure being is something that is always here within you. It's not something you can learn. It's something you simply can re-encounter. As you reconnect with this, you remember who, what, how, and why you truly are. And so as you breathe into your very own being, it's the invitation of yourself to be fully here, honestly, wholly as yourself. In doing so, you give the invitation and the opportunity for every other person in your life to be present honestly and authentically with you, with your life. For each of us to be in the world as we truly are. And so perhaps now you can leave with a parting comment for yourself and carry this comment forward each day. I welcome myself. May you feel the depth, the presence, the freedom, the wholeness, the truth, to be all that you are, simply as you are, moment to moment. And in doing so, may you be that invitation for everyone you meet along the way. Thank you for being you. Namaste.